So the biggest myth or I'd say misconception in our industry is that if you have a mentor or a business partner perhaps, or your spouse will, talk to your business about, or talk about your business with you, or even just a good friend, then you don't need a business coach because you have somebody to talk to about the business. And it's funny, I was asked, this is years ago, when I owned my company, I was using a business coach. I was asked that by a reporter that was interviewing me. And I really struggled with the question of, well, I guess, gosh, if you do have a business partner, maybe you don't need a business coach, because I didn't have a business partner at the time. But over the years now, I've had time to think about it, and I've sat on both sides of the desk now. The business coach brings a lot of value outside of whether other conversations you may be having.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur. It's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Mark Goldman. And Mark, we're going to be talking about a few things, including business is holistic, and you need to consider other aspects of life that impact your business, and also talking a little bit about why a business owner may need a coach and how they can help you figure out things along your journey, and also touching on a little bit of life and business balance. And so it should be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it. And with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be back, or at least be invited on this show as well. Thank you.
Yep. And just as a quick reminder to the audience, so Mark was on our sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So if you want to go check out his full journey there, definitely make sure to go check that out. But now, for those that haven't had a chance to go check that episode out yet, just take a minute or two and introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Wonderful. Well, first of all, I live in San Antonio, Texas. I was born here, spent most of my life here. My professional journey, if you will, or professional career, I started out in accounting. My father had been an accountant, and I sort of followed him into that career path. A few years into it, I found myself in a recruiter's office looking for a better job, and that recruiter ended up hiring me into the recruiting profession. And so I spent about 25 years in accounting recruiting, and that was a wonderful experience. I mean, it was a great career for me. The last 15 years of that, I had started my own company, and definitely made some mistakes along the way, but was successful and was able to build it up, and just exited out of that in 2022. Around the same time, my personal life was changing a little bit. We adopted a small child. So I have a son that's literally 50 years younger than I am. So I decided to do it a little different and start to work part-time instead. And now I work part-time as a business coach and meeting facilitator.
Awesome. Well, sounds like quite the journey and a great introduction. So
Thank
now
you.
with that is kind of a quick intro or a quick introduction. Diving into a bit of the topics at hand. One of the things that we chatted a little bit about is taking maybe a step back and looking at a business as a holistic approach. So in other words, there are different aspects of your life and your person, of things that are going on that are going to be impactful to your business. That a lot of times you don't necessarily take into account or take into consideration as you're just primarily or typically looking at the business. So maybe help us take just a bit of a step back. What are some of those aspects that that we should be looking at or considering, as it can often be impactful for the business that tend to get overlooked?
Sure. No, thank you. I found that when people engage a business coach, or when they come to me and we're having that initial conversation, that generally they fall into two categories. Either number one, they want to grow the business faster than it has been growing, or grow in a new direction. So it's growth oriented. Or number two, they've grown quite a bit. And I'm trying to think of the right analogy, but they're just trying to hold on, for dear life, and they need some controls in place and some infrastructure, and so they're looking for assistance in that. And I fully understand both needs. I have it as a policy, if you will, a promise to myself, though, that I won't help people through that without taking a holistic approach. And what I mean by that is we're not going to grow the business no matter what it damages.
Mm.
We're not going to do things that basically, hurt somebody's personal life. I feel like if you get into business and it wrecks your personal relationships, as you're growing it, no matter how rich you may become, ultimately it doesn't lead to happiness. So that's what I mean by a holistic approach. And people don't come to us saying, gosh, I want to grow my business and at the same time make sure my marriage is strong,
Mm.
whether or not that's on their mind, but that's something that's very important to me, to make sure the relationships with kids, spouse, even extended family, still continues to thrive as well.
So now, just to maybe to expand on a little bit, what are some of those things that, maybe sometimes that people don't give fully appreciation to? Because I don't think most people go into a business saying, "Hey, I want my marriage to crash and burn as I get a business up and going." But the flip side is the often, or sometimes you don't necessarily think about or look at the impact or the consideration or those type of things that are oftentimes impactful to the marriage or to the burning out or to having other issues that you oftentimes go through. So maybe give us a little bit of what are some of those red flags or some of the things that people should be considering that sometimes they don't always give a full appreciation to.
Sure. Yeah. The two things that come to mind are first of all, the obvious one, just, hours in the office, right? Or hours at work. And I can very much relate. Like I said, I built up a business for about 15 years, and it's very easy as a successful business owner, you care about your clients so much. It's very easy to treat everything like it's an emergency, even above, family needs. It's just very simple. And you don't maybe say this, but in your head you're thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna miss this event, but it's okay, I'll catch the next one, and then that becomes the next one, that becomes the next one. And then the second one that maybe isn't quite as apparent is being present when you're present. Um,
Hmm.
I have been guilty of, being at family events, playing with my kids, watching TV with my wife, that kind of thing. And my mind is on a client need or, or a business need. And hey, a little of that is natural, but if you find that that's always the case, if you find that people are having to call your name 2 and 3 times to get your attention back because you're daydreaming, about something in business, then maybe that's a problem. And it's very valuable, frankly, to have an outsider that isn't quite as much as invested in it as you are, that can step back and hold you accountable to that,
Hmm.
which is where a business coach comes into play.
So how do you or kind of go about? So let's say you say, okay, maybe I get into a business, and I think that it is a matter of degrees, and so a lot of times you get in there, and it's hey, well, it'll just be this kind of one time exception, or it's one of those where hey, there'll always be another. I'm not, or the rationalization goes, hey, there'll always be another kids game, or I'll catch it on the next one, or I'll take a bit of time off here, or I'll do something to rectify it. So I think a lot of times you don't go into saying, hey, I'm going to put the family on hold and put them aside and ignore them, but it's one of, hey, this needs to be done right now, or I feel like it has to be taken care of. And then it's oftentimes at the expense of a family, and then it kind of builds over time or it becomes a habit. But now, so let's say you start to fall into that trap, or you start to have some of those issues, and you go and get to, that outside help, whether it's a coach, a mentor, someone that can speak into your life. And so taking the example as a business coach, what do you do as a business coach? What do you do to kind of come in or help people to identify that or correct that sometimes?
Sure, sure. Well, just to, I guess, state the obvious, or not to be too, difficult on this point. There are times that yes, a sacrifice must be made. Maybe you can't make every single game and that kind of thing, but it's when it becomes a pattern, that
Sure.
you have an issue. And then there could be many reasons. Maybe maybe you're growing, maybe your priorities are a little, out of line. Maybe you're growing and you don't need to grow quite that fast or quite that much. Frequently though, frequently though with small business owners, it's a delegation issue. They feel like they have to be involved in every single thing. And really, if they'll let their team members do some of those functions, that they not only get some freedom, but their business becomes even more valuable, operates smoother, and that kind of thing. So a lot of times it's just a matter of having someone, like I said, like a business coach, perhaps, help you figure out how to let go, how to delegate, what that process looks like.
Hmm. So now, I think that's, a lot of times easier said than done. So, I mean, again, I think that people will say, well, I understand I need to delegate or I need to free up some of my time or not be so busy. And yet, just because you have that realization doesn't mean you're going to, just go right out and hire 20 people that you maybe even don't have the funds or you don't have the budget or you don't have the money, or, you sometimes have a hard time letting go or, or delegating some of that out. So how do you encourage people, or walk us through a bit of that counseling or that coaching or that process in order to help people to actually move in that direction, as opposed to just identifying the problem is kind of like saying, hey, you're overweight, you need to exercise more, and people say, yeah, I understand I need to exercise more, and then you go right back to the same habit you're doing. Just identifying the problem is a part of it, but then you actually have to implement some changes. So what are oftentimes some of maybe the changes that you coach people through as far as making those or implementing those changes?
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, you do bring up a good point. You have to have the people on board to delegate to, right? You have to have the right people. So that's the first determination is do we have the right people, either as they exist now, or could we develop them a little further to take on what we need them to take on? Secondly, it's baby steps. You don't delegate the whole thing initially. You delegate it in pieces so people can learn. I tell all the owners I work with that, hey, if you have a staff member that can handle things 75 or 80% as well as you can, then you need to delegate that duty, because the reality is you learned a lot of it on the job or through the school of hard knocks and going through the process yourself. And so the same is going to be, with them. They are going to learn more just by merely handling whatever that duty or task is. And frequently, I mean, let's be honest, sometimes our staff ends up being better at things than we are, once we let loose of the reins and let them use all their gifts and talents and abilities. I
Mm.
learned this the hard way, honestly. I wish I could say that I was just so wise. And when I owned my business, I decided to, let the task go to the appropriate, team members. But frankly, what happened is I got a little overextended. You may find this interesting. I had a podcast that I hosted for about 5 years, and as I got into it, and you could probably relate to this, it ended up being a little more work than I anticipated, and it took
Mm.
up a little more of my time, and it was all by appointment, and so I had to delegate, some of the tasks in my company, and voila, wow, my team thrived, and turns out they were a lot better at a lot of things than I was, and so I was sort of forced into it, but it worked out, and frankly, it made my company more valuable. So I learned the lesson the hard way myself.
No, it is one where I think a lot of times you say, oh, this it won't be this much time, or it'll just creep in there a little bit, or kind of go down that direction, and then kind of before you know it, just as you said, you're spending a lot more time. It's eating up a lot more of your bandwidth than you anticipated, and now you're in it much deeper than where you are intended to start out with. And so it is one of those where you have to make that balance, or kind of figure out what how much time you can devote in any given area. So now, kind of shifting gears a little bit, but kind of going right along with it. One of the things that I think that a lot of times as a business owner, you tend to think, hey, I've got to figure, I can do this, or I can figure this out on my own, or I've got this, or I either you feel like you need to do it or you have to do it. And so, a lot of times people are saying, I don't want to do a coach, or I don't need a coach, or that's for somebody else. It's kind of like, hey, that's somebody else's problem, or that's from someone else. I've got it figured out. And so, how do you go about figuring out when you need a coach? And it's kind of, I'm sure it's a bit of a biased answer in the sense, kind of like saying, asking an attorney, hey, when do I need an attorney? It's, well, you always need an attorney because we know what we're doing type of a thing. But,
Sure.
kind of what are some of those maybe or trigger points or tripping points or times in life when our coaches can be more valuable to your business? You're saying, hey, you probably arrived at the point where a coach may make sense.
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, someone has to be coachable, right? They have to be in the frame of mind to listen to someone else, and whether or not they think we're right or wrong, they have to be in the frame of mind to listen. And I think that comes along with the realization that we don't know what we don't know. I have talked to many business owners that have been referred to me, by other clients and that kind of thing, that just weren't at that point. They weren't ready. The business is doing, very well. It's been more profitable than they can ever imagine. We start talking about how it works, and it's interesting. The business is super profitable, but they just can't see taking 2 or 4 hours a month away from their business. I mean, how could they possibly arrange that? And so they're in sort of a pre-coaching stage. Eventually, generally, they get to the point where they realize that's a problem. But there are a lot of people in that instance. So really, it's realizing that you don't know what you don't know, and maybe there's someone else out there, that can assist you.
Hmm. So now, I mean, I think that makes sense on maybe on a higher level, but when I'm down in the trenches, I'm going to say, hey, I either don't have the time, the money, the bandwidth, or that to allocate to a coach. Kind of as you said, taking that number of hours a week seems like I've already got too many things on my plate, or I've already got enough things that I'm trying to get that work-life balance, and to add yet or one more thing is just going to take away rather than add to the business. And so how do you kind of take or overcome that hurdle? Or maybe as a business coach, how do you help people to realize that it can be beneficial to take that step back, or to devote those hours of time to the business, as opposed to it improves rather than, or is just one more thing on your plate?
But a typical business coaching relationship, it depends, on the exact situation, but it's probably going to be, 2 to 5 hours a month, depending on how you want it structured and that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
so if an owner can't take 2 to 5 hours a month to sit and consider their business, work on the business instead of in the business, then that's a sign, frankly, of some issues. So how do we make that point, that conversation right there? Also, that businesses that run on their own, so to speak, that don't require the owner being there 100% of the time, are vastly more valuable when the owner decides to exit, than businesses that don't. So that's another key point. Generally, what's happened, though, is something has happened in the business, whether maybe it's gosh, a large customer or line of business was lost, or maybe there's been some employee issues, where the owner realizes, hey, I need some outside input on this. And
Hmm.
so they go searching, and generally that's how the relationship starts.
Gotcha. So now you get into it, and is there kind of is this something that you should kind of plan on, that hey, I should always have a business coach, so they'll kind of be with me for the foreseeable future of the business? Or is it kind of something that ebbs and flows, and you bring on a coach to kind of help you make some course corrections, and then as you make those course corrections, you naturally part ways, or kind of walk, kind of what would be the outlook, as far as, is this kind of an ongoing, or a part that you should incorporate to the business forever, or forever forward, or kind of give us an idea there?
Sure. Well, first of all, in the 15 years I had my company previously, I had 3 business coaches during that time. And so there are some relationships that run their course. Um, to your point about bringing in a coach um, for specific needs, for a set period of time, that probably falls more in the line of consulting. You're getting their opinion on some things, or their professional opinion, depending on their background. I think that when it's truly a good coaching relationship and it's the right fit, what ends up happening is you bring that person back over and over, and it starts to be an ongoing relationship instead. So, yes. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. No, it makes good sense. So now as we've kind of touched on that, one of the other ones that we are circle back on a little bit is I think it's for the ever elusive bit of that work-life balance. And I think everybody is looking to figure out, I think that people are wanting to have that balance. If you have a wife and kids, you don't, very seldom, maybe there's the exception out there, but most people don't start out saying, hey, I want to spend all my time at the office, or I want to neglect my wife and kids. And yet that, as we touched on earlier on, that can sometimes happen. But what are some of maybe the actionable steps or ways that you can start to look to get that or work-life balance, or to get a better balance within life, especially if you're starting to let it creep into where you're not having that balance in life, or whether it's you filling it out, or your spouse pointing it out, or you're noticing that that you're having those issues. Kind of how do you go about kind of making that what are some of those actionable changes to make or actionable steps to make those changes?
Sure. Yeah. It really comes down to systems and delegation. I know I touched on that a little bit earlier, but you're right. I mean, business owners don't get into business so they can have personal problems. It just sort of can creep in because you're trying so hard, right? You're trying so hard to run the company and that kind of thing. So really, it does come down to systems and delegation. There are some things as an owner that you should be doing, but there's a lot of things that owners do that they shouldn't be handling, that they really should be delegating. There's a great myth out there. There's a great myth, excuse me. There's a great book out there called The E-Myth, which I recommend any new business owner read. And the gist of the book is that if you're a technician doing something in the book, it's making pies, the person is a baker, and you open up a business doing that thing, well, then your job no longer becomes making the pies or doing what you used to do as a technician. Your job becomes running the business. There really should be other people making the pies at that point. So there again, I really think for a business owner, we're in a very fortunate, situation. We can delegate things as the business owner. As an employee, sometimes you can delegate, sometimes you can't. So we are in the fortunate seat, where we can choose, for other people to do some of the task, and there again, get back some of our own work-life balance.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's definitely some great steps or things to consider. So, well, now as we're kind of wrapping towards the end of the episode a bit, I always like to wrap up each episode with the same question. So we're gonna to jump to that now. So with that, the question I like to always wrap up with is, within your industry, what is your biggest myth, and why is it wrong?
Sure. And I think I'm answering the same question. I'm twisting a little bit perhaps, but so the biggest myth or I'd say misconception in our industry is that if you have a mentor or a business partner perhaps, or your spouse will, talk to your business about, or talk about your business with you, or even just a good friend, then you don't need a business coach because you have somebody to talk to about the business. And it's funny, I was asked, this is years ago, when I owned my company, I was using a business coach. I was asked that by a reporter that was interviewing me. And I really struggled with the question of, well, I guess, gosh, if you do have a business partner, maybe you don't need a business coach, because I didn't have a business partner at the time. But over the years now, I've had time to think about it, and I've sat on both sides of the desk now. The business coach brings a lot of value outside of what other conversations you may be having, because two things. Number one, the business coach is sitting back. They don't have a lot of skin in the game. Yes, they've been hired, to work with you, but the reality is, they probably have several clients, right? And so they can afford to tell you some of those harsh truths that maybe a spouse or maybe a best friend or even a mentor, may be uncomfortable telling you. So a business coach brings a lot of value outside of those relationships. And frankly, they're paid to be there. So you have a lot more engagement sometimes in each conversation than you do in some of those other relationships. So that would probably be the biggest misconception.
Gotcha. No, definitely makes sense, and a great myth to dispel, and a great takeaway. So, well, as we do wrap up toward the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. Probably the easiest way, if you're on LinkedIn, just look for Mark Goldman in San Antonio, Texas. I'll pop right up. The second would be my website. It's 4610ent.com, like 4610 Enterprises. So 4610ent.com.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, make a new connection, find a great coach, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners are out there, if you have your own expertise, your own journey, or you want to be a guest on our newly launched inventive webinar series, we'd love to have you there as well. So just feel free to go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the shows. Another thing is, listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Devin. Have a great day.